All right. So I wanted to discuss sync the rollout of the in-product survey about the merge request experience. There's a link there to the rollout issue of the feature flag. And I wanted to discuss two things. One, the first point there or sub point is how we're going to roll that out and in the context of the purpose of this survey and the objective and what we want to take out of it. And then the second point is just more tactical point about what is blocking or not. So yeah, the first point, my understanding and the reason like we started all of this and many of the decisions we've made about the survey itself, the way it's being tracked is first and foremost an experiment to see how people respond to the survey, if it is a good tool to use, and if it is reliable, and what we need to tweak if we want to continue doing it. And for example, I don't know if we have really thought about, at least in not only in the tracking, but also how we visualize the data. If we've thought, hey, what if we actually keep this survey as it is for, I don't know, let's imagine 2 years. And so the same user would see the survey prompts again and again. And I don't think we've thought that through yet because we would probably just keep this enabled for one instance of someone seeing it, which would be, I think, 90 days, or is it 180 days? I think it's
I think 90 is what we settled on.
was it 90?
I think it was 90, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So when we roll that out, the first people will see it only once, and they can dismiss or respond to it, and they will never see it again for another 90 days. And if we roll that out progressively, that means that there will be a, like the 90 days will shift, of course, depending on when you'll see it and when that survey is available to you. And Stanislav suggested some percentages, and I did some, napkin math, and I think that would result in, like, after 5 days, more or less, we would have 100% of SaaS users with enabled that for them. So it wouldn't mean we would have 100% of responses or dismissals, but 100% of all of SaaS users would potentially see the survey if they visited a merge request. So yeah, I wanted to stop there, and I wanted to hear your thoughts, Stanislav and Ben, and anyone else who wants to chime in on this, to see what you think is reasonable here, given what I think is the purpose of being more of an experiment. Ben, you made a comment.
Yeah, in talking this over with some other members of the research team, it was pointed out to me that 100% of SaaS users is potentially a whole lot of people. And I don't really know how this had escaped my grasp until now, but like we shouldn't generally, like it as a research principle, talk to more people or bug more people than we need to. So depending on, what we think is reasonable for the amount of responses, and this will be a low response rate kind of thing, I don't think we need to enable this for like everybody on SaaS. That seems like a lot. And especially not without us like maybe pausing to make sure that everything is coming in as we expect it. And so, yeah, I just have a concern there. I think especially if we're going to continue to do this kind of thing, survey people about MRs or various other things, we really don't want them to start complaining about seeing lots of pop-ups on our site for that kind of stuff. So yeah, we might want to consider just capping it at like 10% for now and seeing if that gives us enough of a clear signal that we don't need to bug the other 90% of people until we're ready to iterate on this, or change the questions or do something else.
So I think what you're saying is we should try to figure out what is the right number to get statistical significance or something like that, for what we want, right? Yeah, I think, yeah, so this is based on Google's approach of their HATS survey, so happiness tracking survey. And they do this differently in that they don't receive responses from 100% of people at the same time. They only show it for some people during a certain time period. So it's like, I don't know, I think it was like 8% of their user population every week, or 1%. So it was like 1%, and then those people would no longer see it. Then another 1%, those people would no longer see it. So it was rotating the user population. But here we don't have that capability, I think, to rotate. So we just have incremental rollouts, not, yeah, just rotation on those buckets. Yeah, I don't have a good answer at this point about how many we should do, but since it's an experiment, we can go with a ballpark number, I guess, and go from there.
My question is, are you sure about rotation stuff? Do we have it, or we certainly do not have it? If we have it, we can stay at 10% and just leave it like that, and eventually we will get the whole 100% at some point.
My understanding is that once you enable for those like 10%, the users in those 10% will be fixed. I don't think it will rotate. Unless like I imagine that it could rotate if you enable and disable the feature flag, perhaps. So enable for 10%, disable, then enable again for 10%. It would pick another 10% randomly. But I don't think it rotates by default. I don't think that would make a lot of sense. But that's a great question, Stanislav. Maybe it does, or maybe it doesn't, and we can hack that by doing what I was saying, like enable for 10%, disable, and then once you enable for 10% again, the code would pick randomly another 10% of the user population.
We can do the same thing, with just incrementing the percentage. So 1 week it's 10%, next week it's 20%. So it should automatically add another 10% to that, if it doesn't rotate, like technically.
Yeah, and that's the challenge. And what Ben was saying was that if we start incrementing it, we would have to decide at what point we would stop, because 100%, like we won't. It will be too many responses. So it's yeah, I think the way forward here is either to find out if there's a way for us to rotate those like 10% or whatever number it is. But you know, each time you enable or disable the feature flag, does it rotate the 10%? Or we decide a maximum percentage that we will progressively roll out, like the percentages you were suggesting, but we cap it at I don't know, 10 or 20% of the user population, and then we'll see how many responses we get. What do you think?
10% sounds good to me because everyone's talking about 10%, so I guess everyone's okay with 10% global rollout. If we leave it at 10%, we can just postpone this decision, like how much users do we actually want in this survey. So we leave it at 10%, wait for some time, you collect some data, and then we can decide, do we need more data or should it just like keep it like that, and that's it.
Yeah. So doing the math of what Google, so sorry, before that, yeah, I agree with what you were suggesting. I think progressively rolling it out to 10%, so, you know, like 0.1% or 0.01%, and then, you know, multiplying that by 10 and then by 10 until we reach 10%. Doing that I wouldn't do that every day. I would probably do that every week, because I think a day wouldn't be enough time for us to see people visiting MRs and then responding to the survey, unless like we're expecting that percentage of people to always be online and looking at merge requests. So maybe a week would be a good time to then trigger the next rollout until we reach 10%. But just out of curiosity, so how Google did it, they divided by the number of weeks in a year. And so once you got to the end of the year, every week would have a different rotation of users. And that means that every week their surveys are only shown to around 2% of the user population. And then the next week, it's a different 2%. And then the next week, a different 2%, which means that, yeah, if they do that, you know, for a month, for example, it will be around 8% of the user population that would see their surveys. So yeah, I think if we start at,
I mean, if we do the times 10 thing, then the vast majority of the people of the 10% will only see it for the last week, right? 90% of the people that we eventually talk to, right? If I'm doing that properly.
I think so, yeah. In
any event, we're doing right like an exponential scale. So the last week will be of the month, if we're doing it like that, will be like when most people see it. So we won't be bothering people for like most people for an entire month. They either they just see it once anyway. If they dismiss it, then they don't see it again. So
yes. So if we start, like if we do it for a month, so every week we increase the rollout and we do it for 4 weeks, for example, we would have to start at 0.001 and then increment or multiply that by 10 every week for 4 weeks. And that would get us the 10% by the end of the 4th week. So yeah, I think that's reasonable.
cool.
Yeah, I think, does everyone agree with that? Also you, Kai, because you probably will be will get feedback, positive and negative, about this. People will annoy you.
I missed the number that we settled on. So if you want to reshare what that was, then I don't. I would agree. We'll get feedback. I'm not super concerned necessarily about the feedback one way or the other. I think like this is an experiment sort of a long time in the making in terms of both getting the survey in, figuring out how to roll it out and do it. And I'm more anxious to get it out there and sort of see how people respond than I am like, are people going to be annoyed? Yeah, absolutely. Are some people going to provide good feedback? Yeah, I think so. So like, let's just see how it goes. And we may find out after a couple months that like nobody responds and we don't get anything useful. And then we turn it all off and like try something else the next time. And that's fine too.
Yeah. So what we were suggesting is roll out for 4 weeks, start at 0.001%, and every week at the end of beginning or the week, we will decide that later, we will multiply that by 10. So by the end of 4 weeks, we will reach 10% of the user population. And those 10%, which we believe are not rotating, will always be the same people, the same user accounts, would see the prompt and they can answer it or dismiss it. And yeah, so I wrote like a caveat of that is that we don't know how many stale accounts or abandoned accounts are part of those 10%, but that's part of rolling this out, because we may get someone that hasn't visited GitLab in a long time, and they visit GitLab after 2 years of not using it, and they see the survey and they respond to it. So very infrequent users, but also very frequent users. I think it's part of the gamble and part of the study to keep it unbiased. Do you agree with my research perspective, man?
Yeah, I think so. I guess it depends how we're picking the users. Like, I would be concerned if we were picking them by user ID, for instance. Like if we were starting at the lowest user IDs, you know, problem,
Yeah.
right? But I don't
Yeah.
think that's how we're doing it.
No.
So
yeah, that would be Sid, right? And DZ and a few others would see the survey.
So yeah, I think that's fine. I don't think we need to limit it. Sorry to Stanislav, your next point. I don't think we need to limit it for account ages because we're collecting that info, right? And I would like to see if there's any significant difference there.
Okay. Thanks, Stanislav, for also asking about it in the rotation Slack. I don't think that is a blocker to what we were discussing here, and whatever we find, yeah, please share in the rollout issue. I'll be off the next 2 weeks, so I'm comfortable with what we've discussed here. And yeah, feel free to make any decisions based on that. I'm okay with that. I'm also okay if everyone feels like they should wait for me to get back. Like you don't need to wait. You can enable this, and I'll be back by the second week when we're already at some percentage. But yeah, I'm not a blocker. My PTO is not a blocker for this, I think. Okay, yeah, the rotation is sticky. Thanks, Stanislav. So yeah. So yeah, disabling and enabling it again will always be the same users. Is that correct?
I'm not sure about the disabling and enabling stuff, but if we leave it at 10%, it will not increase the user base.
Okay, thanks. And finally, blocker or not about tracking survey dismissals and renders? Is it a blocker to enabling the feature flag and start getting responses across SaaS? Yeah.
If it's not trivial, let's do it, but let's not hold things up. And Stanislav.
Yeah, we can track dismissals. That's really easy. I can actually like create an MR for it today, but for renders, it's not easy because we have a logic that hides all the service in other tabs if you dismiss it. And if we track like plain renders, it will track all the tabs. Like if you have 5 tabs, it will give you 5 tracking points. But the user will see the survey just once. So we'll have to actually track the visibility of it. And it's a bit complex with intersection observer and all other kinds of stuff. So it has to be tested really well for it to be reliable. I don't want it to give us false positives or false negatives. So it might take some time. So the first one is really easy. The second one, if we can live without it for some time, it will be okay.
Yeah, thank you for that context. That makes sense. I'm thinking that it might not be an issue to keep sending the tracking event every time it is rendered. Although, it's not very performant because we're repeating something that already happened, but from a visualization standpoint, we can count only like once. We can deduplicate the rendering events to only count the rendering event once for each user. We can do that in Periscope and visualize that. So it would not skew and increase the funnel in a wrong way. We can deduplicate that at the visualization level. But yeah, it might not be performant. And yeah, I understand if you wanted to do it right at the code level.
I'm personally okay with just doing dismissals for now and seeing where that gets us.
Okay, let's roll with that. I'm comfortable as well. I don't have a strong opinion, so yeah. Stanislav, if you think that's enough to proceed with the dismissals, let's just do the dismissals now and think about the renders later.
Yep.
All right. Cool. I think this was productive. And yeah, that's what I had to discuss. I don't know if anyone wants to discuss any other points, although we're already over time.
I think we're good. Thank you, Pedro and Stanislav and Ben for taking this on and leading it. And like I said, I'm excited to start seeing how people respond to this. It's not anything we've done before, so I'm just genuinely curious. So thanks for leading the effort and getting it to this point. It's been, I think, much longer than any of us thought it was when Pedro hooked up this idea a while back. So
yes. But yeah, thanks for prioritizing it as well. I'm hopeful that it will be a good experiment. At least we will learn something, either like continue doing it, not do it, or do it a bit differently. What I'm afraid of, to be honest, is that regardless of like if it's a positive or negative experiment, that many other teams will want to do it immediately after they see this live. Like a lot of people and product managers will say, "Oh, I want this." Like, how can I do it? Let's fork Stanislav's code and do it in our area now. That's what I'm afraid of.
Please no, please don't do it.
Yeah, for everyone's sake, no. Yeah, but yeah, we will have to manage that, and I think that's also a good thing. Like once we start rolling this out more broadly, is to immediately say that and say like, this is an experiment. Like this is for merge requests only. We're still figuring out how we can then scale this to other areas if it is a success. Like set the expectations that way, so that people know what to expect, both as users, but also as people that improve GitLab, the product. Cool. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Stanislav, for making it this call. It was great seeing everyone, and have a great rest of your week. Cheers.